And welcome back. We have with us two members of the ICJ Education Campaign, history educator Cesar Ross, and one of my favorite educators, a history educator, Miss Brenda Armstrong. Good morning.
Good morning.
I am told that the education campaign is fully in swing.
Yes.
At this point, it is intensified. Let me put it like that. But the campaign itself has really never stopped completely. Maybe the range of the landmass in terms of Belize's extended 8,867 is more adequately covered at this time. There was a phase when persons, for instance, in the teaching profession, social studies teachers, were particularly targeted. And that goes back to 2013, 2014. 2014, 15, in fact, the teachers have come together more than once. And that's from Corozal right down to Toledo.
We just saw the news, I believe, last night where we had Major Lloyd Jones presenting, and we also had the ambassador.
Yes, that was for the administrators of the schools.
Absolutely.
So that was targeted again.
But for those of us who weren't conscious and felt as though, listen, we've just started recently, what is the role of the educators in the ICJ campaign, and how many educators are there as part of this?
The educators have been asked to go out and there's a lot of invitations, and so there's a person doing all the scheduling and calling and setting educators in the areas to go and simply present the history, present the different attempts, and present the ICJ option, just do an objective presentation of it, not ask for a yes vote, not ask for a no vote, just simply share information, which is, I think, the most important part of the campaign as such. Get the people to become comfortable with understanding exactly what is being asked and what has led up to this point in time as such.
And sorry, I wanted to just add, I'm glad to hear Cesar include one of what I believe is the most important component, that when we are asked to go out, there's a more or less standard PowerPoint presentation. But of course, you being who you are, you might add a different flair to it. Yes. But it is to share the information. And there's no position in it. And I always make that very clear when I go to an audience. I'm just here to share with you all the information as it relates to the upcoming referendum. I don't ask them to take a position, and I know Cesar hasn't because I've been with him too.
You know, being an educator, and it's ironic that at this time there is a divide between the government and educators, because educators are special. They're able to do things which convey a message in a way that no other profession can do. Lawyers can't do it, politicians can't do it. But at the same time, there is information, and history is probably the best, next to math, I think. History is one of the subjects that you really can go factually and not offend.
Yeah.
But we're also human. How do the presenters take out what their position is, particularly in circumstances where you can give a nice and down the line objective presentation, but when them Q&A come, how do you manage to, during the entire process, particularly the Q&A, and after you've put together all of these stellar facts, which history, the value of history is you build on it. You either project forward or you assess current situation. Yeah. And after you've presented and all these facts, it probably points to one direction. Or it might point, I'm not saying that it does in this case,
All right.
But surely the history, for example, the history between Belize and Guatemala, it points towards aggression from Guatemala towards Belize. If you lay out all the facts, the people they've killed over here, the incursions, the activity on the Sarstoon. So if you leave all that information there, the listener will say, in Guatemala, and they're really aggressive.
That's
How do you manage to keep the objectivity in an environment where it's very heated?
They're pressing for, and they press for
they do.
The opposition.
Yes, yes.
And I found that everywhere I've gone, from the north to down south, they are pressing for a position. They want something direct, and the point is that we have to make it clear. It says, you know, I'm sorry, my personal position is mine, and I don't want it to become part of the education.
Does that affect your credibility as presenters? Because you say, Mr. Armstrong and Mr. Ross, and they had something. You know.
No, I don't think so. No. In fact, just this past Monday night, I had a session and I made it clear I will not be here to tell you how you should vote. But there is a vote coming, and I want you to be able to go into that vote as well informed as possible.
Well, let's inform the public a little. Let's start off with, we have two segments in terms of the presentations this morning. We have a historical look at the 1859 treaty, and we hope you give us the historical context of that. And then we want to look at the 1931 note. These are two pivotal occurrences in our history, and will affect surely the strength and veracity of our case. So maybe we can start off with the 1859 treaty.
All right, and setting what brings about the 1859 treaty. And for that, I want to take us back to the 1492 quote-unquote discovery of the world. And for the next 150 years after that, Spain's claim to pretty much everything in the Americas as such, no? The British, even though a 1670 Treaty of Madrid, which Spain accepted that they only had right to that which they effectively occupied, the British still, for the next 100 years after that, still conceded to Spanish sovereignty when it came to the settlement here, the British Honduras as such, in treaties 1763, 1783, the Convention of London 1786, leading right up to the Battle of St. George's Key. The British were still conceding Spanish sovereignty. The Battle of St. George's Key pretty much changed that, right? In that after the Spaniards were defeated, right, and they walked away, they turned their back and they sailed away, even though the 1802 Treaty of Amiens, British gave back the territory, Spain never came back to exercise any form of either military, political, juridical sovereignty, anything at all after 1798. So, and even Pedro de Aycinena, Foreign Minister of Guatemala in 1859, conceded that Spain abandoned their sovereignty and that Guatemala never picked it up. So there is a process of acquiescence of sovereignty by Spain and Spanish America, and the beginning a sort of a consolidation of sovereignty by the British after 1798 as such, with extending mahogany camps to the Sarstoon. As a matter of fact, they were beyond the Sarstoon as such, into Petén and into Rio Dulce area. And so all of this led up to where, by the time Spanish America, Central America, Mexico gets their independence in 1821, and it became independent as one entity as such. New Spain becomes independent as Mexico, and that included all the way from California down to Panama as such. So it was one entity, with a Mexican declaring himself emperor. I will see it would be the first. But he was quickly...
Politicians and these titles of...
Yes.
He was quickly overthrown within the year of his assuming power by the forces. By the forces, the sort of liberal forces in Mexico, who wanted a republic, not a monarchy as such. No?
Right.
And so in 1823, they established a republic, and they sort of cut the Audiencia of Guatemala, Central America, off from the republic. And so Central America goes on to become independent as one entity in 1823.
Including Belize?
Well, Not necessarily.
quite.
At that point in time,
You said it was a block. The block
yes, the
can't be
Audiencia of
separated from
Guatemala.
Belize.
But interestingly, Belize and all evidence, all the treaties signed, all the military incursions was being conducted out of Yucatan, the Audiencia of Yucatan, which was part of Mexico, as such, right? So, political, juridical, military, everything was being done out of Yucatan. The Battle of St. George's Key was led by Arturo O'Neill, the governor of Yucatan at that point in time. No? So we're not going to put it into the Audiencia of Guatemala as such. No? And so that process there of the Audiencia of Guatemala becoming the United Provinces of Central America and trying to create a republic was a failure from the beginning. They couldn't decide on where to set up the capital, on who should be president. At a point, they were having 3 presidents concurrently trying to run the province as such: Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras as such. And by 1838, they call it quits. They say it's not going to work. It's a failure. Important, all during this time, Spain has not recognized their independence, right? Spain does not recognize Mexico's independence until the 1850s as such. And Central America just fall into becoming independent as such, right? So, and that's one of the challenges, because Spain didn't officially do it. They didn't hand over a constitution. They didn't hand over a map of territory or anything like that. Central America, for the next 100 and change years, have been fighting with each other over exactly where the demarcations. They have Costa Rica and Nicaragua have gone to the ICJ. El Salvador and Honduras have gone to the ICJ. Costa Rica and Honduras, Guatemala and Honduras have gone to the ICJ as such. So the borders have been difficult for them, right? To settle as such. And so when they become independent in 1839, that's when Guatemala begins to suggest that Belize or British Honduras is part of their territory as such. No? And the British pretty much ignore it. In 1840, they declare that common law will be what governs the settlement as such. And by 1850, we have the United States wanting to play a role, because the United States had just taken California in 1848 as such. And so they had now, from the Atlantic coast to the Pacific coast, a big empire and a lot of gold. 1849 was the 49ers, the big gold discovery in California. And so trade was important to them, but they couldn't get across from the east to the west, because all the middle was what was called Indian territory. And the natives there were not Pacific, were not allowing them through. So shipping was the way to get there. But at that point in time, that meant going all the way around South America and Tierra del Fuego. And so they wanted a canal, and Nicaragua was the first best option in their mind as such. And Nicaragua has 2 big lakes as such that cut nicely across from one side to the other. And so the United States become involved. But the problem is that the British had
involved in the politics of this
Central American interest here. They had already made the Monroe Declaration from the 1820s, but at this point now they physically...
the Monroe Declaration is...
The Monroe Declaration is when President James Monroe declares that no European power should colonize or attempt to recolonize, because Spain didn't recognize their independence because their plan was to get it back. Such, right? And they were creating alliances in Europe with countries who they felt would help them reconquer the Americas as such. Exactly. And South America.
Which would include Belize.
Which would include everything as such. No? So the US wants that canal. So they meet with the British, because the British have, from Cape Catoche, they have British Honduras, they have the Bay Islands, they have the Mosquito Coast. So the British territories existed all the way there. And the Mosquito Coast is the Atlantic side of Nicaragua. And the entrance to the lakes is right there on the Atlantic side of Nicaragua. It would have to go through the Mosquito Coast as such. And so the US meets with the British in 1850 and sign the Clayton-Bulwer Treaty, saying, okay, no more colonization, right? But there's no very clear what does that mean. So in 1853 they meet again, and they have the 1856, the Dallas-Clarendon Treaty. And in that treaty they say, they convinced the British that they should hand over the Bay Islands to Honduras and hand over the Mosquito Coast to Nicaragua, right? And when it comes to British Honduras, the British demand that that be recognized as British territory as such. And so the U.S. concedes to that in the treaty and recommends that the borders of that settlement be defined within the next couple of years as such.
Yeah.
Within 2
Actually,
years.
they specified 2 years.
Yeah. Right.
But this sounds like a lot of quarrel. It's, to me, what it sounds like is everybody, the owner abandoned the lot. If I had to make the comparison. He gone, states gonna live. He gone there without visa, so he not come back.
Come back.
Yeah.
And when he leaves, everybody who is there decide, I want to start cut out, chop out my lot. And that somehow the person with the bigger muscles start to push over. But the people who are fighting, none of them have a good title to this piece of land.
Well, there's a little wrinkle in that comparison.
What is it?
You are assuming that the owner who went to the States had been living in the land, had occupied it. And in our case, Spain, though they claim sovereignty, had technically never occupied the stretch of land that is now Belize. There were several attempts to gain control of it. And that is what Cesar was referring to when he said all the relations between our landmass, our area, and Spanish contact came from the north in Yucatan. That's why when the independence was granted, we would probably be in Yucatan more than the Guatemalan Audiencia, right?
I'm afraid to dodge that bullet.
Yeah.
Because what I'm hearing you say is that possibly that a stronger case can come from Mexico than it would come from Guatemala in certain regards.
It could, but in 1893, Mexico did a treaty with Britain, where it officially says, my territory ends at the Rio Hondo.
Right.
I am not, that's British territory, I'm not interested.
And that is key, you know. Yeah. And sometimes in our looking back, we have made enough note of that treaty because they had their back and forth. And for a long time, while the British were in the settlement, whenever, for instance, the enslaved population would rise up, it was up north they would head. And so Mexico was seen as harboring, and all these things did have an impact. But after 1893, none of that.
See, Ms. Armstrong, my focus is not necessarily on occupation, but on title, who may own it. Because I try to make the comparison again, I try to simplify it as much as we can.
Yes.
That if I own a piece of land in Barranco, and I never go and live there,
okay.
I never gone to Barranco yet. I never gone farther than Belmopan. But my pa give me it, my pa got title, I had a will, and he give me it, and I have it. I have the paper for it, see the paper. If I never go down there once, I still own it. The persons who go on it now, by Belize law, and squat on it, those people can try to offset my title because of their ownership. And so it doesn't dilute my title. What it does is, in fact, try to intercede. It tries to interrupt my title. And so this conversation in terms of that backdrop seems to show that, listen, there is squatters than a quarrel.
And
so the squatter with the squatter with the biggest right, that the one way one get it. I wanted you to put it in the context of a previous conversation we had, where you were speaking about Guatemala's declaration of indigenous people to certain areas where they had declared them to be Guatemalan citizens. And they had been collecting taxes, they had been occupying it through, possibly through that law. And what impact that has on the matrix, the historical matrix that you just laid out.
Yeah, the collection of taxes was never through Guatemala, right? The collection of taxes here was always through, again, Yucatan. That's what is interesting, right? Spain's collection, Spain's military entradas, Spain's trying to establish encomiendas here, right? And the important dynamic here is that there was never a continuous occupation. Every time Spain tried that, the Mayas would revolt as such. And so between about the 1530 to about 1640s, Spain tried that multiple times, always through Yucatan, right? And so there was never, even the census taken, even the coming to collect taxes from Tipu came through Yucatan as such, right? And so every
time... So the Spaniards are not to the Guatemalans?
Yeah, to Spain. Okay. It never reached, by 1821, there is no territory here, there is no Spanish agent here, nor any of it from any of its audiencias, neither the Audiencia of Yucatan or the Audiencia of Guatemala has any agents, anybody here. As a matter of fact, from 1798, this complete cession, one can say, right? De facto cession. And the British begin to exercise, take that opportunity to give out land grants, or location laws, as they called it back then. They begin to do political intervention through the public meeting, through the magistrates. They begin to have cases as far south.
What do you call it an effective session? I don't know if I'm misunderstanding you, but it sounds to me like everybody just abandon a piece of that piece over there. Just lot of things that happen, everybody confused, and that piece over there, nobody really touch it.
Yes.
That piece we have to get to.
In essence, remember now, the original inhabitants of our coastline looked for a place to hide because they were involved in illegal activities at the time. The pirates. Belize was the perfect location. It was that narrow strip of land with a protection, so that reef out there plays a key again, and hey, that's a pun, plays a key. and you are right, it is almost like a forgotten portion, and that lends itself to the point where Cesar had reached, where the United States can, in a sense, press England to define those boundaries, to not just say you are there, establish formally and legally what your parameters are. And that's what brings us, that is what brings us to 1859.
And what is guiding this whole issue, remember, is the 1670 treaty, where the European powers, including Spain, signed recognizing that Spain was only entitled to sovereignty over what it effectively occupied.
Right. And that now answers your other question.
So they never there, they never occupied.
They weren't
title equal occupation.
Yeah.
And never did they.
And 1670 is key too. So when we come to the treaty, and this has been on the screen for a while, but this preamble then sets the stage for what is this agreement about. And in the preamble, it clearly says, whereas the boundary between Her Britannic Majesty's settlement, that's us, and possessions in the Bay of Honduras, that means all the little islands beyond, and the territories of the Republic of Guatemala had not yet been ascertained and marked out. So because of this, we have never done this officially. Her Majesty the Queen of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland and the Republic of Guatemala, being desirous, I like this language, you know, with a view to improve and perpetuate the friendly relations which happily subsist. In other words, which exist right now with the talk,
diplomats,
right? But this is what we are here for. We are look like we're friendly, right? And then therefore, to define the boundary aforesaid, have resolved to conclude a convention for that purpose.
And that preamble is important because Guatemala has declared this treaty null and void because a cart road was not built. And the preamble is saying that wasn't the purpose of the treaty.
It doesn't appear anywhere there. Yeah. Now, we would have been in a harder position to say what this treaty would be if the preamble hadn't been so clearly stated.
You know, we have quite a few slides to get through, but this is rubbing me. If we go back to that slide, it sounds pretty much like what we're taking to court. So we are now in 2018 at the position where we were in 1859.
Well,
That
somebody explained it this way.
You agree with that?
You have the legal document that stated exactly what we just said in the preamble.
But I think we have
the
more
parties who signed to it, after having signed in 100 and how many years ago, in 1859? Lot. Their descendants now come forward and say, you see that thing our ancestors signed? We're not there with that. So the two parties no longer are happily subsisting. They are not as happy as they used to be. And in fact, the parties have changed. It was Anglo-Guatemalan, and now it's a Belize, Guatemala problem.
But can we go forward?
So then,
because I know we have quite a few slides,
right.
And I don't want Belizean people to miss anything.
Well, I think if any Belizean has not heard this article yet, then today is an important day.
This
Give it to us then.
Our constitution also.
This is in our constitution.
Give it to us.
Article 1 does exactly what the preamble told it to do, establishes, beginning at the mouth of the river Sarstoon, in the Bay of Honduras and proceeding up the mid-channel thereof to Gracias a Dios Falls. Now this is laying out what the borders of Belize and Guatemala would be. This is where one country will end and the next one begin.
This is where Guatemala is currently antagonizing us right now. No?
And especially when you see that mid-channel.
Are you letting a black and right?
Because I say, I no see it. I'm Guatemala, right? I don't see this at all anymore. Then turning to the right and continuing by a line drawn from Gracias a Dios Falls to Garbutt's Falls on the river Belize. So when you look at the map, and I think we should have a map that shows this, yes, due north until it strikes the Mexican frontier. If you come up the river, turn right at Garbutt's Falls, and you can see the shape of Belize forming right there.
That's some real village. This is the map right here.
This is it right here.
There's some real village direction there. Turn right instead of longitude and latitude.
Well,
this is how old the treaty was.
Exactly.
Yes.
And in the language that they chose to explain it, which I think at the time was pretty accurate, you know, and clear. Actually, even in today's generation, it's still accurate and clear. Gracias a Dios Falls, I can go, if I would dare, and find that falls on the river Sarstoon, and I will know, hey, if I keep going any further west, I have left Belize, because right at that falls, I'm to turn north. And I could continue north until I get to Garbutt's Falls on the Belize River. And once I'm there, with my compass, whatever, I continue to the Mexican frontier. That was what the 1859 treaty was set out to do.
Did it set out to do it, or did it actually do it?
In some ways it did, but because of the same point you raised just now, obviously it wasn't successful. In the sense that
Article 6 actually clarified that both territories have to appoint commissioners, and this is the way the commissioners would conduct the demarcation.
Right.
And in fact, we will look at the fact that both territories did appoint their commissioners, and both commissioners went there and put the demarcation markers as such that would establish.
So it was actually done?
Yes, a pile of stones at Gracias a Dios, and another one.
But there are no cement in India, is there?
No.
It was a pyramid cairn.
That's why Belize's houses were wood, my friend. Lots of trees here.
When you talk about the Sarstoon and what is happening right now, and people call for a protocol, Article 6 gives you that protocol exactly.
Well, take us to that then.
Well, it's right here. It is further agreed that the channels of the water line of boundary described in Article 1, which is the river Sarstoon, of the present convention, shall be equally free and open to the vessels and boats of both parties. and that any islands which may be found therein shall belong to that part on whose side of the main navigable channel they are situated.
That's how we get the Sarstoon Island.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I agree with Cesar. This is your protocol. What is missing, if anything, is what will happen if you don't respect it, or if I don't respect what is there.
Laws are written with the expectation that they'll be followed. And so maybe that's why.
But even in laws, we allude to what the consequences of not.
But remember, they may happen anytime.
Yes.
So let's go on to Article 7.
Yes. Now, what was said earlier, and I just want to introduce this part to say, Pedro de Aycinena, who is the Guatemalan foreign minister, and Charles Lennox Wyke, who was sent by the British, must have been having a pretty good time in their negotiations, and their writing out. Their language is excellent. They were on a good high, I think. If I
trying
were,
to tell something historically that we...
if I if I am telling this segment to my class is always enjoyed the fact when the actual historical events sound like a good story, right?
Like a good movie.
Yes.
Netflix movie.
So I'm applying some of that here. The reason why I say that is that when they had finished with Article 6, their job was done. Perhaps in the spirit of their signing, they both decided to include Article 7.
Brata.
Article 7 was, in fact, within it, alludes to the perpetuating of the friendly relations which at present so happily exists between the two high contracting parties. And so, with the object of practically carrying out the views set forth in the preamble, and for improving. So in order to say, well, okay, we've examined and we have set out what our boundaries are, but to continue our good relations, they mutually agree. And in today's world, we would tell somebody who wrote like this, you are redundant. Because mutually already contains agree.
Has to.
And conjointly, which is the same as saying together, right? So we agree, we agree, we agree. We can say it right there. To use our best efforts, at that time they said their best efforts, by taking adequate means for establishing the easiest communication. And it further explains, easiest would be either by means of a cart road or employing the rivers, or both united, according to the opinion of the surveying engineers. So we will put our efforts together and we will establish a means of communication between the fittest place on the Atlantic coast near the settlement of Belize and the capital of Guatemala. And I have to point out,
You see the
it didn't say the road or whatever means of communication was to come to Belize. I've heard persons refer to that. It says near the settlement. So the two parties were to work on that.
If I can go back to the slide, the devil is always in the details. In any contract, the wording of the contract is important, and a treaty is just a glorified international contract.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that it didn't have to include a cart road.
No.
It could have been the river. Why could the river not have been the Sarstoon itself?
Well, you're going from Guatemala City now,
Okay.
the capital of Guatemala, to the coastline of Guatemala, near Belize. So in other words, we will use the means that is easiest.
And my second quick question on this is, listen, the purpose, as you established in the preamble of this agreement, was make it define boundaries.
Yeah.
And as you said, then Ghana leave it to 4,
Yeah,
which is farther than far. 4 is farther than far. And they threw in this thing for the purpose of communication. So if the treaty itself had failed, then there would be no boundaries. If this fails, then there'd be no communication.
Exactly.
So the failure of this clause is not a complete failure of the treaty. It's a failure all friendly and happily. And
well, I'm glad he's the host, you know, because he just did our work. Right?
So with that, can we go to the next slide?
Yes.
and important before we move, the thing here is Guatemala likes to say the British failed to build the road, so the treaty fails. But this is saying both of us are supposed to do this.
Yes, yes, understood.
Very important point. If the road wasn't built, it certainly is not the fault of one party, because both parties agreed to the undertaking.
Nice, nice. Can we go to the next slide before?
We make sure
well,
this
actually,
is a picture
this
of
is
the treaty.
Yes, they just
filed
include
in treaty laws at the UN and such. The signature.
There's a signature. This is Aisenena on
and
the right.
Seal. I love the old time
yes,
seal.
and there's a little trail of wax.
Yes, and the pretty writing.
Oh yes.
This is proof that they surely were having a high time, as you put it.
You see, I have to be careful with my words. I like the fact that this is shown, because when we print the articles, it looks as if something was typed.
And modern.
But this is the way it actually was done.
And with the signatures and everything. This is official.
Right.
Yeah. Black and white.
And those signatures represent the nations that they were.
Who did sign it?
But there's Charles White for the British and Pedro de Aisinena, the foreign minister of Guatemala.
Right.
But there's also the ratification that because they went back to their parliaments and they came back with the ratification. They brought that back, and the ratifications are signed
as well.
Also.
So
all is there.
Let's not miss anything.
Now, this is when the efforts are made to carry out what the treaty said. And in 1860, the commissioners were appointed. Henry Ray for the British and Colonel Manuel Cano Madrazo for Guatemala.
Where are these slides? If I'm watching here and I want to sit with my family on Sunday and I want to go through these slides, are they available to the public?
Well, these slides were put together by the Education Campaign unit. I think you could find
on the referendum unit page
website.
It's a website,
yeah.
And then it gives you documents and you can download.
That's where, exactly.
So these activities
were taken on then, and you notice
1961.
no cement, limestone pyramid, and they were erected December the 8th. The treaty was April, and in 1860, 1 year later, well, a year and a half, December the 8th.
And these activities carried on for the demarcation are what would have obtained for any country doing the same thing at that time?
Yeah.
Yes.
So we went through what Nicaragua went through, what Panama went through. This is exactly what every other country went through
more or
to
less,
demarcate their borders. Am I right?
Right.
Unless they have a clear, defined and demarcated when they got it already as independent.
For example?
Interesting.
I could think of one example.
Don't let that
Not right now.
Don't let that keep you up.
You give me
Because
homework.
our area, there was no clarity.
Yes.
Right? Even the U.S., the 13 colonies, and then what they are now, there's change. Mexico was much larger and collapsed as a territory.
Can we go back one slide? Because there was a slide that showed that the work continued right through to 1863, right?
It says 1865.
Well, in 63, they begin to look at the cart road, right? And so they have an additional supplementary convention for that. And there, the discussion, it was agreed that the British would pay £50,000 and Guatemala would put the labor and resources.
Which was smart.
That was the commitment to the building of that communication.
And they never paid it.
Well, they gave themselves 6 months timeline. They gave
the last
6 months
bullet
to
is
ratify,
key.
right? And the British Parliament agreed, and they voted in favor of the £50,000, right? And so the delegate from England came prepared. But when that happened, Guatemala was engaged in a civil war with El Salvador, and said they were not ready. And another 6 months passed, and they were still not ready.
So when they just paid and left the money? Put it in an envelope and left it and say, listen, see the money where I'm telling you about the card road, see it here?
This is a ratification now, you know.
Yeah, they have to ratify it first.
Payment of money.
Then, But it also includes the ratification of that additional convention, because it's an additional convention, and Guatemala doesn't do it, and they are not ready until July of 1865.
And why was it not paid then?
Because the British had decided that the time expired,
gone.
and they know, I'll come back again, can do it. Which, you know, it would have been solved with good faith. In hindsight, good faith,
it's a bit reckless.
do it, not sure?
And it was opportunist too, to a certain extent. Remember now, Charles White wasn't sent to make that Article 7 NA at all. So reluctantly, the British were agreeing to making that payment as had been agreed. I guess.
I won't go any further than that.
I guess there was an opening.
I have other questions, but I won't, because I have to get you a couple more slides.
Yes.
This has been very interesting.
This is the signatures. These are the signatures.
Of Henry and Manuel Cano Madrazo of the border demarcation and the points at which they put the cairn.
What is that drawing?
That is of the Belize River, and the whole identifying and measuring to get the exact location.
So part of the survey is also part of the demarcation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
It's making it a little bigger.
Trying to find people ain't good, you know.
I know. Yes,
all right.
so we can go ahead.
Can we go on?
This
looks like
slide gives us
Sarstoon.
the mid-channel, and you see the mid-channel lines.
And there is
right
the now famous Sarstoon
Island.
Island.
This was prepared by, this map is, it looks like a very modern map.
Yes.
No limestone here.
No, can we go back to the end of the Sarstoon that shows the island? 1 minute. Go out,
part of it.
Out east. Just to point out the line. That's the mid-channel, and you see how the island is on the upper side of that mid-channel.
Absolutely.
Right.
And this is done with the assistance of this, and I can't remember the acronym nor the exact names, but United Nations has this geographic and team, this scientific team, scientific organization, and they were the ones who helped create this map as such, looking at the mid-channel.
All right. Well, let's go a bit further. I know we're going to be time crunched, but
this is 1931 now.
Correct, the exchange of notes.
The exchange.
Can you walk us through that?
The decision was made to remark the borders and to erect more permanent
and hopefully finalize it.
Markers, because remember it was a pile of limestone, right?
Somebody may take some too.
And water might have done some damage. He knows things we don't know, you know.
So there's the British send a note to the foreign minister, and the foreign minister replies, Guatemala foreign minister, it was Alfredo Skinner-Clee, was the foreign minister then, and he replied yes, confirming that it should be done, and both nations again appoint their new commissioners as such. And so in British Honduras we had Fred Brunton appointed as the engineer
and James
commissioner.
Wade.
So what happened between 1859 and 1931 for you need to go and redo something that's already done?
Well, because of the cart road not being built, there was sort of a suspension of the work, and they had suggested that they had to put markers in between. There were the main demarcation points, but they wanted to fill in the spaces
in between the two falls. There should have been more markers.
So it's not so much a remarking, but a continuation,
enhancing, right?
Enhancing. So yes,
and so Guatemala appointed theirs. So in May 1929, the terminal points were visited again by the commissioners, and the existing monuments were replaced by cement concrete monuments. So that would make you happy there.
You get my cement now?
Each 5 feet in height above the ground level with a circular copper top stud let in the top. Upon each stud, a cross was cut to mark the exact position of the terminal points. As such, right? And so that's a picture of the example.
With the full participation
of both
countries, and not only the participation of the countries, but the officials from those countries.
Right.
So it's not just
and we have the
two
signed
taximan and a fisherman put it together. These are
no.
official.
And the exchange of notes that are referred to for 1931 is the full summary, the collection of all the correspondences going back and forth between the two countries and the signing off on the completion.
Of those new border
that
demarcation
marker
things.
has 2 bars on the top with the words written that clearly indicate which side of the marker you are on. So if you're lost and you come to that point, you have to play the fool to not know you're on the Belize side or you're on the British Honduras side at the time.
Ms. Brenda, allow me to ask this quick question, which is, what if it weren't that they were playing fool, but that they somehow got better legal advice as to the import of the failure, the importance of the failure to build a cart road or to give access as part of a clause? Could it be that they just got different legal advice after 1931?
I'm not an expert in the way the Guatemalan political leaders' minds work, but the small portion of history that I've been afforded a glimpse at would indicate that not only in Guatemala, in many instances, countries assume different positions when it is of convenience to them. And perhaps things may have changed that would have caused the change in the position of that country. I'm really not taking the liberty.
You had a very good swing at it just now, though.
But interestingly, if they are going to invalidate the 1859 treaty, call it null and void as they have, they would also have to invalidate the diplomatic exchange of notes, because the British took the liberty, and they did not object, of taking that to the League of Nations and registering it as treaty documents as such. And it has the follow-up exactly. We, the commissioners appointed by the government of Guatemala and British Honduras to establish a permanent boundary marks at Garbos Falls on the Belize River and Gracias a Dios Falls on the Sarstoon River, met at Fire 1, Belize River, on the 7th day of May 1929. But then they continue and talk about it, and they sign off.
But it wouldn't be hard to get rid of the exchange of notes of 1931 if the foundation of it is flawed. It's, for example, you buy a car. I might be oversimplifying it, but there has to be a reference point for the people who are looking at it and all they see is a lot of words. We have to relate it to them. But to my mind, it's kind of like me buying a car, and I find out when I buy the car that the car is either no good, or the person who sold it to me never had title to it. And I also, in addition to buying the car, where I get a certificate of title, I go and I get a license plate. Now, if I find that the car isn't mine, then I can't say, well, see, I have a license plate, but for you, because the license plate is only as good as the quality of the title that I got to the car.
The only fly in that ointment is that
I like when you put fly on
you on your own bought your license plate.
Yes.
I didn't go with you and sign at the traffic department that this man should have his license plate. This exchange of notes.
Did it together?
Yes. And we saw the photograph of the 2 engineers, the commissioners from Guatemala.
But they say at the time they didn't know, they thought that they actually owned the car too. So they actually drove us there to the traffic department.
That's why, and it's interesting because some people are saying, why not take only the 1859 treaty, right, to court? And I like the fact that we're not doing that because, as you said, you know, you're hedging your bet on only that. We also want to take to the ICJ historical consolidation. If we go, if we go to the ICJ, historical consolidation over 220 years of exercising sovereignty and such. We also want to take the UN Charter itself, says that one of the most universal principles is self-determination, right? We want to take that as such, right? So we want to, you know, dot all our I's and cross all our T's and make sure we go there with the full gamut of what international, applicable rules of international law allows us to.
Well, I interrupted you while you were in your 1931 exchange of notes, and I know people out there want you to continue.
Okay.
They're rooting for you.
Well, just to wrap that part of it up then, the British note that was dated in August of 31 then is a final document that is signed indicating that those monuments they had agreed to erect have been erected, and
There's been compliance.
Both countries, not just on the British side, but on the Guatemalan side as well. 25th of August for the British, 26th of August for the Guatemalans.
And it follows from the implementation of the 1859 treaty. The British made clear that
it ties right back.
British trick there, you think?
Well, notice what the entry says. Guatemala agrees to accept the monuments erected by the commissioners on the frontier. In acceptance of the monuments, there is acceptance of the existence of the border.
You
cannot, you cannot have it both ways.
The part did it.
Yeah, but you sign. You say
we agree that monuments did it. We don't agree what the monuments mean.
Ah, but it tied it back to 1859.
Correct. Follow.
There's the stud that we read about.
The West has Guatemala, the East has British Honduras.
Right.
Marking.
And what is that, the braille looking?
It's Guatemala.
It's marked Guatemala.
Guatemala.
Okay, and that's British Honduras. Interesting.
And the copper stud there with the cross is the exact
mark. Right.
And these are still there as we speak right now?
Yes.
Wow.
That is a recent picture. The picture before this one is a recent picture of how the one at Garbo's Falls looks.
By me asking that, I've not been with the Belize territorial volunteers to visit the markers.
But thanks to them, the area around it is cleared of trees, and there was a very significant ceremony there at one time. So that is there.
Will their thing.
Very brave guys.
Yes.
So those are the two areas. I mean, our purpose today was to highlight those two.
And it wasn't finished. It appears.
Oh, there's one. There was one more slide.
We got them, man.
The British proceeded to communicate the text of the notes for, well, that is what Cesar had said already. The British went that extra step and registered these notes at the League of Nations, which then makes it have a valid status, in a sense, in that body that governs our
government has to publish something in the Gazette to be challenged.
Right.
They published it in the League of Nations Treaty Series in 1932, and there exists no record of Guatemalan objection to the registration as such.
Right.
So it then cements that.
Interesting.
So to get back to your question earlier, why go with the same question to the ICJ? I made reference to the fact that maybe the two parties aren't of the same mind again. The court then has the task, if that is the case, if we agree, to look at these legal documents, to hear the case that Guatemala is now to make. It's not Belize that needs to prove its claim, it's Guatemala that has to prove it. And whatever documents they bring up have to refute the existence of these two very important treaties, because if the matter is taken to a court, and in this case, the International Court of Justice, the terms under which it is heard are laid out. This is international law. Not, should I feel sorry for you? Not, have you been treated fairly? Not, were you robbed? Not, did the British take advantage of you? Why didn't they pay that money then? None of that.
But there are a couple of things, and I know we're running out of time. And I really hope that there was a part 4, 5, and 6 of this conversation. But there are a couple of things. One is that it appears that that's not the way we framed at least the referendum question. The referendum question seems particularly and unknowingly, to my mind, wide. It's because it does include, by not restricting it, all of those things, why they didn't pave the road, why they didn't do these things. By framing it and wording it in a way that we have, it is extremely broad. That's the first thing. The second thing is in relation to us moving forward in relation to all of these issues. There is one proponent, I'll call his name, Major Lloyd Jones, and I believe David Gibson, Ambassador David Gibson, who who have said, listen, we don't have to go to court because they say these two things we want to talk about, this 1859 treaty and this 1931 exchange and note, that the crux of the matter. If we resolve that, then everything else falls like dominoes. So let's resolve this first, an advisory opinion, rather than going to court. So we know they gamble everything, and we just deal with the other two things here. So doesn't the historical, and I'm doing exactly what we spoke about earlier, and I'm putting you guys on the hot seat, but doesn't the historical facts that you've just laid out, and the overwhelming black and white, we got it, white lie and black lie, but black and white, no lie, that we have, the issue here is whether or not these things are valid, and if they're not valid, what is the importance of the breaches in relation to the 1859 treaty? It's not whether or not Guatemala entitled to peace, I Belize, and therefore we are exposing ourselves to more risk than we should, based on what the history is telling us and what you showed us?
Let me put it this way.
Yes?
Would an advisory opinion be binding?
To my mind, yes. If I know, if I go, right, and I'm at a bar, and I put everything in a very simplistic way. If I'm at a bar and I meet the judge, and I tell the judge, Judge, I have a case where then people think they won Milan, but we have a thing in writing, right? Look at this document for me and tell me if you think it's valid. And the judge said, boy, that thing valid. Then I go back to my neighbor and tell her, especially if somehow my neighbor is informed of what the judge thinks before, then why my neighbor carry the court when my neighbor wants to say, well, the same judge will make the decision, and he don't say it's valid, so why go to court?
Exactly. Why go to court? In other words, why do a finality to the dispute? Because if the neighbor know that the advisory opinion going against them, then they're not going to go to court.
Yes.
They want to stay back out and continue the blowhard. Because Guatemala has shown throughout all this time that these things and the opinions, and they hired the president of the Permanent Court of International Justice, who told them.
But they can blow hard all they want, because at that point in time, it's like someone who comes to rob you. If you don't know if they have a bullet in their gun or not, if you think they have a bullet in their gun, you act different from when you realize, you see this gun with the hole for me, you don't got no bullet in there, so you could blow hard all you want.
The other thing, blow hard means continue the molest with the Sarstoon. Exactly. Blow hard means not help with dealing with the Chiquibul incursions.
But then as soon as I know that you have no value in your threat, then I can now assert myself with a level of confidence. I can engage my partners with a certain level of confidence that you have to do over there and sulk in your corner.
The only fly in that ointment, and I hear you, it's a very clear line of thinking.
A colorful one too.
Yes. Yes, that black and white thing. But the only fly I am hearing is that we are at 2018. Yes. And just as we went back and looked closer on these two sets of documents, there are events that take place all the way through time. And seeking a legal opinion on the validity of something that clearly has not been regarded as valid by the party that you are in contention with would be a solace to you only. Because when you go for that opinion, it has no jurisdiction on the other party, who has already, as I said, indicated that they don't respect that. So the question that I would have to ask, if we get the opinion, to what end would it be applied? And it is something that would naturally be considered, well, why are we not just getting some recognized court to say, or somebody, that these legal documents are still effective? But my only concern then would be, does that console just you? Would that have an impact then on the matters on the ground as they currently apply?
Well, can I ask this question in response?
You see why he was happy we came?
It's a very happy. This is what the country needs: constructive conversations with intelligent people who have the same risk. We're not going to go live in Miami or in some other Panama. We will Banya or we are dead here.
Yep.
And so these conversations are important to us, and we've been able, in a mature setting, to dissect the issues, to put them out and expose them, and to either agree or disagree, or agree to disagree.
One person would disagree with you though.
Who's that?
Because one person yesterday said, yeah, but you all live north of the Sibun.
No, the one with the one Belize.
Yes.
PG sneeze and we cough. I
haven't lived there, but I mean, I want to go there.
Yes, it's one of my favorite parts of the country.
Yes.
But maybe one of the values in the historical context of looking at these two documents or agreements is one of the biggest hurdles we are finding right now with the education campaign. Which is that Belizeans are definitely, I don't care what anybody says, they're not comfortable with where we are. Some people might be leaning yes, some people might be leaning no, but no one is comfortable because of what is at risk. If I tell you I bet you $2, Miss Brenda, of something happening, you are more likely to bet me if you are a betting person than if I tell you I bet you your house and your favorite son. Don't ask me who I know that one day.
Oh, God.
You will less likely to make the wager. Going to court is a gamble and a bet. So if it is that we're only getting an advisory position that has no binding effect, if it comes out one way or the other, if it comes out against us, it's not binding, and we can go and circle the wagons again. Or if it comes out in our favor, we can become emboldened, and probably our inhibitions to go to court might be dropped, and we might say, yes, man. Yes, man, Mr. Foreign Minister, Mr. Prime Minister, Miss Brenda, Mr. Ross, we're going to court tomorrow. So maybe what it would do is to take away some of the political backwash that we're having by making Belizeans feel more confident based on the historical context that you presented. Isn't that valid?
I do want, sorry, go ahead, Dan.
I do want that time, so.
Yes. I understand that, and my question is, the legal opinion doesn't do that for us. We have gotten a legal opinion from someone.
We pay them. If we get an advisory opinion, we don't pay the court.
Yeah, true. But we don't pay it. We don't get it as such, right? We don't go through the expense. And on that team there, apart from Sir Elu Latterpatch, we have Schwebels, Judge Schwebels, who was one of the past presidents of the ICJ as such, right? We have Vicuña. We have I forget the
remember.
But we have some of the top international lawyers who have either sat on the International Court of Justice or taken cases to the International Court of Justice as such.
Mr. Ross?
And they have put together a complete legal opinion.
Legal opinion. Lawyers, some of them, right?
Is he a lawyer?
Yes, mea culpa. I have to, first disclaimer, yes I am. But there is a school of thought that says a lawyer shows you a way to win a case as opposed to showing you what your legal right might be. So in that case, the legal opinion might be a way of showing us this is the way you can win it. Not necessarily that we do have a right. And so that is the risk you run when you have a legal opinion. A court, on the other hand, because you pay the attorneys. So the attorney will show you, okay, you've been on this land for 20 years, you have no title. This is the way you win it, by squatters' rights. Not that you have title. When you go to a court, the court is the person who gives you finality in terms of what the legal issues are. And in relation to the legal opinion to the court, the advisory to the court, there'll be some finality from an impartial person where you not pay, when you have no bias, who's not showing you how to win, but is showing you and defining what the issues are, that you are right or wrong.
Yeah, I agree with that. One fly in the ointment as...
Not a fly, we need social tax.
Deal with them.
Guatemala also hired
an
international lawyer,
when we started
the past president of the Permanent Court of International Justice. And he put his report, and we report as such, in which he told Guatemala, there is no approach, no line that you have that will give you sovereignty to any part of the territorial Belize.
Exactly.
Nice, nice.
And he was paid by Guatemala.
Yes. I was
the PR? It's probably still. Well, we are fast running out of time. I don't know if there's anything else quickly in wrapping up that you guys would like to leave the Belizean public on the issue of these two agreements of the 1859 Treaty and the 1931 Treaty.
One of the things I would want to mention is that the Convention of Vienna on Treaties, when you read it, make clear that boundaries in treaties have a life of their own. So even if somehow Guatemala had the right to nullify this treaty, right? And the same Vienna Convention says no, two parties have to decide that. But even if they do, and somehow the judges feel that they do, they have already ruled, right? In Nigeria versus Cameroon, that a treaty, once written, is binding, because treaties are the only way for nations to establish international, with boundaries particularly. And that boundary, as long as it has been operationalized, as long as they have worked on good faith. And Guatemala keeps telling us there's no border. But I tell my students, every time I go across the shore, then collect my passport and stamp my passport. And anytime they stamp that passport, they are acknowledging that I'm crossing a border.
Good closing shot.
That's a good closing shot. Is there anything you'd like to leave us
I
with?
just wanted to do a pitch for these two documents, these two flyers. This one outlines the 1859 Treaty, and this one is the exchange of notes. And both of these are available.
They're easy to read?
Once you set your mind to it, yes. There are some parts of it you might need your dictionary with you. Okay. But for teachers, for people who are readers, and for persons who even might need help to have it read, it's still good to have the written word in your hand, because we looked at some slides, but maybe I need to go back. I tend to do it myself, and I will break it down. So these can be picked up by persons, and every time there's a forum, the referendum unit makes these available. I just wanted to make a pitch for citizens to get their own.
This should be every household. Every morning I get a text message from BWS for water outages. These should be.
This is a kind of thing.
Well, can I also mention, apart from what the government through the referendum unit or the international boundaries unit are doing, a month ago, the UB and the history department and the social sector senators met and decided that we were going to launch our own campaign. And way back then, we spoke to Asad Truman, and he committed to us even before government, the whole with government came out as such.
So big things are happening
between November 20th to December 9th. We are going to have town hall meetings in every district municipality, the towns and cities, including independents.
Well, that's something to look forward to. But we are completely out of time. We've expired time 2 times. We kill it 2 times. Kill it dead.
You get to put in the other plug, I have to say, in Belize City, Wesley Church, 4 o'clock Sunday.
Nice.
You can come and hear.
Well, I want to thank you guys for coming in, and we wish you all the best of luck. We wish the country all the best of luck in getting the information together and making the best decision possible. That's all the time we have. We have to take a commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about the Belize International Film Festival. So don't go nowhere.